Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy. And in today's video, I'm bringing you guys a video on some controversial wide receivers that people are debating all over fantasy on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever you can find stuff on fantasy on YouTube. People are talking about them, and these are guys that I feel like I have a pretty strong opinion on whether I would want to be drafting them or if I'm looking to hit them with the Michael Jordan fade away and not be looking at them at their current ADP. So if you guys do end up enjoying this video and you want more fantasy football content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day surrounding around fantasy football. As the NFL draft approaches, we will continue to post more NFL draft content as well as just regular NFL content when someone gets traded, when someone gets picked up off of free agency, when I view it as an important move. I talk about it a couple days ago when Sam Darnold got traded. Boom. 5 seconds later, it's on my channel. So if you guys want that breaking news, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. So let's get into it. First controversial wide receiver is Michael Thomas, wide receiver of the New Orleans Saints, currently coming off the board as wide receiver number 6. Now, last year, this guy was being the first wide receiver drafted off the board in pretty much every single league, but did not finish that way at all. He only played in 7 games last season, which is why his wide receiver finish is so low. Even with him not having a deep injury history, which you guys should understand, because besides last year, he never really ended up getting hurt in his NFL career. He missed 7 games last year due to a high ankle sprain that occurred week 1 up against the New Orleans Saints. And then again in week 7, he ended up hurting his hamstring in that game right when he returned, finishing as wide receiver number 93 in PPR, wide receiver 97 in half PPR, and wide receiver 102 in standard. This is obviously due to a significantly decreased workload due to only playing 7 games. He had 55 targets last season, 7.9 per game, which obviously is very high on a per game basis, but low compared to what other wide receivers are getting because they're playing 13, 14, 15, or 16 games to be able to get over like 120 total targets on the season. He turned those 55 targets into 40 receptions, 5.7 per game, 438 receiving yards, and 0 total touchdowns. Now, if you guys remember in 2019, this man literally balled the fuck out, and there's a reason why he was being drafted as the number 1 guy in fantasy football. It's because he was so consistent. 149 receptions last year in 2019, or 2 years ago in 2019, 9.3 per game, first at the wide receiver position, 186 targets, first at the wide receiver position. He also had 9 total touchdowns, third at the wide receiver position, and the most receiving yards with 1,725, which is 107.8 per game. This guy was balling in 2019 and was down tremendous in 2020 due to the injury. So what is my kind of thought on Michael Thomas? Now, there's obviously a huge change in this offense in New Orleans, going from Drew Brees to what should be famous Jameis Winston. And I went ahead and went on RotoViz Week and looked at the Game Splits app, and I tried to determine what the difference with Michael Thomas is compared to with Drew Brees versus without Drew Brees since he has been in the NFL. Now, Michael Thomas is an absolute menace and had 1,000 yards every year except for last year due to injury, which is something that is just super interesting because even as a rookie, this guy was a baller in 2016 and he has not stopped since. In his 60 games with Drew Brees versus 10 without. In half PPR, he was averaging 14.9 with Brees, 14.89 without. In PPR, 18.51 with Brees per game, 18.74 without. In standard, 11.3 points per game with Brees, and 11.04 without Drew Brees. The receptions looked a little bit better without Drew Brees, 7.7 per game versus 7.22. The targets did go up without Drew Brees as well, 9.6 versus 9.37. The touchdowns were indeed lower, though, without Drew Brees, without Drew Brees, 0.3 versus 0.48, and the yards were up without Drew Brees, 92.3 versus 83.78. So really, it's kind of just a mishmash. I would have thought the numbers would be completely different with and without Drew Brees, but it turns out it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is for the slant god himself to get open. So what is my overall thought on Michael Thomas based on right now? Wide receiver 6 seems to be a heavy price, but the more and more I think of it, the more I start to buy back in on Michael Thomas. The more, Michael Thomas will probably finish as a top 5 wide receiver. Now, obviously, he's not as interesting as these other young, up-and-coming guys like DK Metcalf, like that, right? Like Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown. But Michael Thomas has proven it every single year he's been in the NFL. I understand he was riddled with injuries last year, but like I said, injuries have not been a concern throughout all of Michael Thomas's career. With Jameis Winston, things are definitely going to get spicy. 100%, because Jameis, as you guys know, isn't the most accurate passer, but he's also going to be slinging the ball deeper down the field, which is not necessarily Michael Thomas's forte. He's more of a run 4 yards, hit the slant, bang, catch it, catch 7,000 passes in a game, get over 100 yards, and play very well. But I still think with Jameis Winston, Michael Thomas can do it, and I am going to consider on the draft or avoid, I would draft Michael Thomas where he's going at wide receiver 6. Again, it's not as sexy, but I do think that by the time we're drafting in August, I'm going to be higher than Elon Musk on Mr. Michael Thomas. Next wide receiver up here, we got Robbie Anderson. Now, he is controversial because Mono Man Sam Darnold is back with Robbie Anderson. And you guys know, on the Jets, was not the best Robbie Anderson. The best Robbie Anderson we have seen yet in his NFL career was last season in Carolina. He finished last year in 16 games as wide receiver 19 in PPR, 23.5 PPR, and wide receiver 27 in standard leagues, now coming off the board as wide receiver number 34. Averaging 14 PPR points per game, 11.5 PPR points per game, and 8.1 standard points per game, making him finish on a points per game basis as wide receiver 29 in PPR, 33.5 PPR, and 36 in standard points per game. Now, I bring this up because season finish is one of the most deceiving numbers when it comes to fantasy football. If you draft a wide receiver that plays 16 games last season and he misses some of those games, his numbers are going to be significantly lower because these guys are getting boosted by the fact that they play 16 games. Like I said, wide receiver 19 in PPR. But when you look at it on a points per game basis, he was only wide receiver 29. So on a weekly basis, he's not really getting it done for you, but it's just at the end of the season, when you put all the numbers together, he was just able to stay healthy and play much better, obviously, because he was on the fucking field. Robbie Anderson's splits with or without Mono Man Sam Darnold are also very interesting. With Mr. Sam Darnold, he played 25 games from 2018 to 2020 when Sam Darnold was drafted. In 20 and 21, without Sam Darnold, shout out to when Sam had mono. Those are some of those games as well. 9.87 half PPR points per game with Sam versus 9.65 without. 11.63 PPR points per game versus 12.24 without. 8.11 standard points per game versus 7.05 without. This is because without Sam, the targets went up. 7.81 versus 6.52. The receptions, 5.19 versus 3.52. Now, Sam likes to find Mr. Robbie Anderson in the end zone, it appears, because it's 0.44 touchdowns per game with Sam versus 0.14 without. But the yards were also up without Sam Darnold versus with Sam Darnold. So what are we supposed to think about all of this? To me, Sam Darnold does not really change my projection of the Carolina Panthers offense. I talked about this in yesterday's video a bit in the mock draft, but it's either a slight net loss, an average of what it was with Teddy Bridgewater, or a traumatic fucking boom straight to the moon with Sam Darnold, because I believe in what is called the Adam Gase theory. The theory is that Adam Gase just absolutely sucks absolute penis at being a head coach. And guess what? Once he's gone, once he takes his chains off the fucking quarterback, the guy balls out. We saw Ryan Tannehill in Miami. He's playing pretty good, but, you know, not the best. Gase is kind of holding him back. And then we see him go to Tennessee. And then Ryan Tannehill is the only 10 I see because this guy is playing out of his mind. Kenyon Drake goes from the Dolphins. In the same year in Carolina, the motherfucker scoring 7 million touchdowns, rushing for 1 million yards. Devontae Parker, Adam Gase leaves, Brian Flores shows up, even with Ryan Fitzpatrick, plays amazing. So what is it? Is it the fact that these players were always good and Adam Gase is bad? Personally, I believe so. I think Sam Darnold's going to light it up in Carolina. And I also like the fact that Robbie Anderson now does not have Curtis Samuel, who is now in Washington with the player I just talked about, in Ryan Fitzpatrick. So this seems like a very good overall offseason for Robbie Anderson. But at his ADP, I'm all for it. I'm all for drafting him at wide receiver 34, so I'll put him in the must-own, must-draft category. But again, just be a little bit cautious because his numbers were not as high as they may seem. But that's something like the Wizards of Waverly Place intro. Everything is not what it seems. Now, if you're not like 20, how old would you have to be? Maybe like 18 to 24, maybe? You would understand that. If not, maybe that joke just went right over your head. That's what we call an airplane joke. Wink, wink. That was a solid dad joke for you guys. And another great joke is not me. So make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate it. We're about halfway through the video. It helps me a ton if you hit that subscribe button down below. We just reached 11,900. Hopefully could reach 12,000 before the NFL draft in a couple of weeks. So next player we got up here is Mr. Boo Boo Smith Schuster. That's what Antonio Brown called him, of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wide receiver 27 currently off the board. And we have a similar scenario with Juju as we had with Robbie Anderson, but it was much worse in Robbie Anderson's case when it comes to finishing on the season versus his points per game kind of output. He finished the year in 16 games as wide receiver 16 in PPR, 18 half PPR, and wide receiver 22 in standard, averaging 14.6 PPR points per game, 11.6 half PPR points per game, and 8.6 standard points per game. On a points per game basis, though, finishes wide receiver 23 in PPR, 27 and a half PPR, and wide receiver 32 in standard. So again, make sure when you're looking at these players, you're doing your research, don't just look at end of season finish. Look at both where he finished at the end of the season as well as his points per game. The points per game is much more important than a lot of people will tell you about. It is very important. So Juju Smith-Schuster coming back. They bring him back on a one-year prove-it deal, I guess, with Big Ben. Now, I'm not very much concerned about Big Ben. I think he's fine for one more season. Eventually, the wheels are going to fall off the Big Ben train, and it's just going to end traumatically. He's going to... maybe it's this year, but it's going to hit Ben like a truck. I'm not too sure how long he has left in the tank. Is it just this year? Is it maybe 2 more years? I don't know. But I know eventually it's going to hit Big Ben, and he is going to go down, and he's going to be yelling timber. Shout out to Pitbull. But Juju, I like Juju a decent amount, but at his ADP, with the amount of wide receivers in this system that I just like better than Juju, I am very worried. Juju's still 24 years old, so obviously in a dynasty standpoint, he can probably still get it done and will potentially move away from the Steelers. If he was on the Chiefs, like I thought he was going to be, he declined the Chiefs. I'm on here saying the complete opposite. I'm like, you have to draft Juju in not New Orleans, not the New Orleans Chiefs, you silly goose, on the Kansas City Chiefs. Then you're just completely getting a 180 take. But here in Pittsburgh, I'm just not sure it's going to work for Juju. I'm not sure he's going to be able to become like a top 25 wide receiver. Now, I understand you're drafting him as a wide receiver 27, so the risk isn't as much there. So technically, I wouldn't say I would be avoiding him at the price you're paying right here, but I think as the more casual audience hops in fantasy drafts in August, his ADP is going to skyrocket up because everyone knows fucking Juju, the guy who said the Browns is still the Browns, the guy that's on TikTok dancing every single day. And that's funny and all, right? Juju seems like a very nice guy, but at the end of the day, I'm not drafting Juju for his character. I'm drafting for his performance on the NFL football field. This is not a points per TikTok dance league that we're playing in here. We're playing PPR, half PPR standard. That does not account for how many fucking Corvettes this man hits, okay? I don't understand drafting him at the sense where I think he's going to be. I think he's going to move up to be like a top 20 guy. I think people are going to buy back in. I would much rather just draft his teammates in Chase, Claypool, or Deontay Johnson. Personally, I just see much more upside in both of those wide receivers. Now, this could be debatable because Juju could really go back to form like he was with Antonio Brown a couple years ago, his rookie season, his sophomore season. When he's playing amazing, it would not surprise me. So I'm not going to say to avoid him, but he's also not necessarily a guy that I'm like, holy shit, you have to draft him. At his ADP here, I'll draft him. But if he, moves up there, elevates himself in the draft to like a top 20 guy, top 15 guy, there's no way I'm going to be drafting Mr. Juju Smith-Schuster. Final player on the list, we got Hollywood Brown. Now, why is he a controversial player? Because everyone is going to, in my opinion, get tricked into drafting this man again. Wide receiver out of Baltimore, wide receiver 39 coming off the board right now. Last year in 16 games, finished as wide receiver 36 in PPR, 34.5 PPR, and 32 in standard leagues, averaging 11.4 PPR points per game, 9.6 half PPR points per game, and 7.8 standard points per game. On a points per game basis, he finished as wide receiver 47 in PPR, 43.5 PPR, and 39 in standard leagues. So why am I kind of a little bit nervous about Hollywood Brown? I'm nervous, one, because Sammy Watkins isn't the answer there. They need another guy there that is going to take away the fucking coverage from Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown is one of those guys that you want to draft in a best ball league because he's going to play really good a couple of games, right? He'll have a game where he scores 21 points. He'll have a game where he scores 18 points, 20 points, and wins you a week in best ball. But it's not going to do it in your fantasy lineup because he is so inconsistent. Last year, he had a grand total of 99 targets. That's not great. 58 receptions, 42nd most at wide receiver. He only had 769 receiving yards, very nice. And he had 8 touchdowns, which is very good, actually, 13th most at wide receiver. But that's not really kind of a number that I see him reaching again unless he's getting these big burner plays. But this is only going to happen in a couple of games. I don't want to take this shot on Hollywood Brown because I just do not believe he really is what we saw his rookie year, where he had a couple of boom games. Actually, that's cap. He is completely that guy because he had a couple of good games. Last year has a couple of good games, and people will be drawn back in. They'll be sinkered in, hook, line, and sinker like you're fucking fishing. People will come back to Hollywood Brown, and they'll talk him up again. He's fast as fuck, and I agree. This man is speed, straight up Lightning McQueen. But at the end of the day, speed isn't what wins you your fantasy league. It's fantasy points, and Hollywood does not get those on a game-for-game basis. To me, it's not even worth the risk. I don't think I'll be drafting him on any teams. And I think, again, he's another one of those guys that is going to be heavily targeted because of the upside he presents. But the downside is the fact that this guy is going to have probably 4 good games every year, and you're never going to know who it's going to be against. So I am going to say I am going to be avoiding Hollywood Brown in my fantasy leagues unless they bring in a guy in the draft that I think could be the number 1, and then Hollywood Brown is just sneaky really good every week, and then bam, reversal, 360, split, reverse cowgirl type deal here, and I'm all on board with the Hollywood Brown train. So let me know down below what you guys think of these players. Do you guys like Juju? Do you like Hollywood Brown? Do you like Robbie Anderson? Do you like Michael Thomas? Or are you completely on the different end? Do you hate all these guys? Obviously, I doubt anyone hates these guys, right? All probably nice guys. So you just don't like them for fantasy football, I should say, because obviously none of these motherfuckers are going to watch these videos, right? But I don't want anyone to think that I hate these players. The only player I genuinely hate in the NFL is Tom Brady. As a Dolphins fan, that would make sense, right? The guy just bent me over a table, just relentlessly fucked me without the use of any lube. It was very sad, but it is what it is. Now he's in Tampa, and it's Dolphins time. Shout out to my boy Tua. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below. Let's have a nice comment section down below, but comment down below the word bear. Shout out to Andy Dalton, the Ginger Ninja. I love you guys all. Have a great rest of your guys' day. Make sure you guys stay safe. As always, it is Wednesday, my dudes, hump day. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your guys' day. Thursday, we'll be back with yet another banger. And yeah, we're just going to continue trekking on. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your guys' day. And yeah, see you guys on the flippity flop. Good boy.